Greetings and peace to you. I hope you're well and in good health, of a sober mind and in spiritual equilibrium. Today we continue Soul of the Apostolate, Part 4C. It makes the apostle radiate the supernatural, the efficacy of this radiation. One of the most formidable obstacles to the conversion of a soul is the fact that God is a hidden God, Deus absconditus. But God, in his goodness, reveals himself in a certain manner through his saints and even through fervent souls. In this way, the supernatural filters through and becomes visible to the faithful, who are thus able to apprehend something of the mystery of God. How does this diffusion of the supernatural come about? It is the visible brilliance of sanctity, the shining forth of that divine influx which theology commonly calls sanctifying grace. Or, better still perhaps, we may say it is the result of the unutterable presence of the divine persons within those whom they sanctify. Saint Basil gave it precisely this explanation. When the Holy Spirit, he said, unites himself to the souls purified by his grace, he does so in order to make them still more spiritual. Just as the sunlight makes the crystal upon which it falls and which it penetrates more sparkling and bright, so too the sanctifying Spirit fills the souls in which he dwells with light, and, as a result of his presence, they become blazing fires, spreading all around them grace and charity. The manifestation of the divine, which showed itself in every movement and even in the repose of the man-God, can also be perceived in certain souls gifted with an intense interior life. The amazing conversions which some saints were able to effect merely by the fame of their virtues, and the groups of aspirants to perfection that attached themselves to them, proclaim loudly enough the secret of their silent apostolate. Saint Anthony caused the deserts of Egypt to become filled with men. Saint Benedict was the reason why an unnumbered army of holy monks rose up to civilize Europe. Saint Bernard's influence throughout the Church, both upon rulers and their people, was something unparalleled. St. Vincent Ferrer was greeted, wherever he went, by the wild enthusiasm of huge crowds of people, and what is more, he converted them. There rose up such an army of valiant saints in the wake of St. Ignatius of Loyola that one of them, all by himself, St. Xavier, was enough to save the souls of an incredible number of pagans. The only thing that can explain these wonders is the power of God himself, radiated through his human instruments. It is a terrible misfortune when there is not to be found one really interior soul among all those at the head of important Catholic projects. Then it seems as though the supernatural had undergone an eclipse, and the power of God were in chains. And the saints teach us that, when this happens, a whole nation may fall into a decline, and Providence will seem to have given evil men a free hand to do all the harm they desire. Make no mistake, there is a sort of instinct by which souls, without clearly defining what it is they sense, are aware of this radiation of the supernatural. What else would bring the sinner, of his own accord, to cast himself at the feet of the priest and ask pardon, recognizing God himself in his representative? On the other hand, it was when the full conception of sanctity ceased to be the necessary ideal of a minister of a certain Christian sect that this sect found itself infallibly abolishing confession. John, indeed, did no sign. Without working a single miracle, John the Baptist attracted great crowds. St. John Vianney had a voice so weak that it could not reach most of those in the crowd that surged around him. But if people could hardly hear him, they saw him. They saw a living monstrance of God, and the mere sight of him overwhelmed those who were there and converted them. A lawyer had just returned from Ars. Someone asked what it was that had impressed him. He said, "I have seen God in a man." Perhaps we may be permitted to sum all this up in a rather commonplace comparison. It is a familiar experiment with electricity. Put a man on an insulating stool, and then establish contact between him and an electric machine. His body becomes charged with electricity, and as soon as anyone else touches him, he gives off a spark and shocks the one who has contacted him. It is the same with a man of prayer. Once he is detached from creatures, a continuous flow is established between him and Christ, an uninterrupted current. The apostle becomes an accumulator of supernatural life and condenses in himself a divine current which is diversified and adapted to the conditions and all the needs of the sphere in which he is working. Virtue went out from him and healed all. His words and acts become mere emanations of this latent power. But the power itself is supremely efficient in overcoming every obstacle, obtaining conversions, and increasing fervor. The more a man's soul is filled with the theological virtues, the more such emanations will bring these same virtues to life in other souls. The interior life makes the apostle radiate faith. Those who hear him realize that God is present within him. I'm going to stop there and break these next sections up into further subdivisions. Each one deserves its own treatment. Excuse me. I hope you see now, at least in part. If you're just now tuning into these videos, please go back and do yourself the great benefit and favor of listening to the other chapters. But very concisely, he has laid out why the interior life is so essential, and why, frankly, we see so little real movement in the church today. Committees, councils, bands, music, concerts, giveaways, volleyballs thrown around, beach balls thrown around, dances, musicals, sports. We have it all. And yet this one thing is the one thing that makes fruitful any other thing we might be engaging with. Some menial task, like sweeping the floor, can be done in the presence of God, with the knowledge of God. sitting quietly when it appears like nothing is happening, the most things could happen, because we are drawing near to Him, and He says, "Draw near to me, and I will draw near to you." Like someone caught in a nuclear blast, or perhaps on the peripheries, they become irradiated and they begin to die. By drawing close to Christ in the sacrament, we become irradiated merely by the fact of having sat there. I hope that made sense. I look forward to continuing these recitations. Please pray for me as I pray for you.